Welcome back to a new episode of Dev Drawer. Today we're going to be continuing what we were doing last week with this custom WordPress website using Elementor. We're going to be building out our own custom theme this time, and this again is going to be part of a very long video series, so it's going to be short enough that you can kind of understand what you're doing and get to the point where you need to go. So if you like this kind of video, definitely hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I got plenty more of these coming. It's probably going to be 6 or 7 videos in the series. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so now that we have Elementor installed, we have our WordPress site set up, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Visual Studio Code. And there's a few things that we need to create inside of this folder structure for our theme itself. So let's go over here to the WP content folder, themes, and we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it, let's call it law firm. So inside of this law firm, there's a few files that you need to create in order for WordPress to actually work. However, we're not going to be doing a lot of structuring with inside of Visual Studio Code on the code side of it. We're going to be doing it more on the front end side of it, with having the code side of it kind of back it up for us. So first thing we need to do is let's create a new file, and we're going to call it style.css, and inside of that style.css we're just going to add some information about the theme that we're going to be creating. So what you need to add is theme name, and then we're just going to call it law firm sample, and then the next part we're going to do author, and this is going to be the dev drawer, and then description, and this is going to be a sample website created for a sample law firm, and then finally we're going to add in the version of it, which is going to be 1.0.0, and then we're going to close out that comment. So for now, this is all we need to do inside of our style sheet, but we also need to create a new file called functions.php. And then we need to create a new file called, I think it's index.php. I believe you can run it with just these. However, Elementor does require you to have the content displayed in the code in order to run Elementor, or else you'll get an error notification saying that it basically can't pop up and put any of the content inside of it. So we're going to go ahead and create that. And I think I also want to create a simple page template as well. So let's create page.php. So let's go to the functions first, and we're going to create a few things inside of this just to make it a little bit easier for us. Because if we don't do this, we wouldn't have the ability to add register navigation menus. We also want to eventually be able to create a custom image size, and then we want to enqueue the scripts so it actually pulls the style.css. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a function, and we're just going to call it, function, and then we're going to call it register nav. Spelling is really weird today. Register nav, and then we're going to use the WordPress function register nav menus, and then we're going to pass an array to that. So let's do array, and let's open it up, and then we're going to call our first menu, we're just going to call it header, and then we're going to pass over just the name header. So if you were doing this to be where it was, this header part could be done in different languages, you were going to create a MO and a PO file for it. In order for it to be translatable, you would do something like this in order to make it, and then you would just call law firm or whatever you wanted to call it. But for right now, we're just going to be setting this up to be just header. That way we're not really too worried about it being translatable right now. Alright, so oops, there. So we also want to create a menu for our footer, so I'm just going to copy this down, and we're going to call this one footer, and we're going to have the variable for it as footer as well. And then just to have one, we're going to create a 404 menu. So let's do 404. And then we're going to call this one the 404. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so now we need to create a function that basically takes this and uses that function inside of something called setup. So we're going to check first to see if the setup function exists. If it doesn't, then we're going to run through it. If it does, then that means there may be another theme that's using it, which most likely wouldn't have a possibility for you since this is going to be the only theme that's being run on it. But we're going to go ahead and check for it anyway just because it's good practice. So we got if function exists, and then we're going to call our function setup, and let's close that and do our end if, and then if it doesn't exist, we want to run function setup. And inside of this function, we're going to add theme support, image sizing, and we're going to register that nav. So let's go ahead and do register_nav. We want it to run that function. And then we also want to add the ability to create post thumbnails because we're going to be using those when we go to create a staff page. So let's do add theme support, and then we're going to do post thumbnail, and I believe that would be all I'd have to call there. Post thumbnails, not post thumbnail. And then finally we're going to create a custom image size. So we can do add image size, and we're going to call that image team because we're going to be using it on the team page, and I'm just going to create a squared off image. So let's do, we want to do 475 pixels by 475 pixels just because that's based on the design, that's about the size that they're going to be. And then we're also going to pass over that we want it to trim it. If it's larger than 475 by 475, we want it to trim it down the way that it's actually centered so that it's not cutting off weird. So we're going to, at the very end of this, we're going to pass over an array. And then we're just going to say we want it to be trimmed at the center point of top and bottom, and then center point left and right. And that should do it for our setup. So we're taking this navigation, we're making sure it's being used, we're adding the post thumbnail so that we can actually add a thumbnail, and then we're creating this custom image size that we can then call inside of our template that would allow us to have something that's a squared off image even if our client or ourselves don't upload a squared off image. Next thing we want to do is we want to create another function that pulls in our themes in the header and our style and our JavaScript if we use it in the header and the footer. So I'm going to create a function called scripts header, and then I'm also going to create another function called scripts footer. And then inside of this, because it is good practice to have your CSS at the top and your JavaScript at the bottom, we're going to add in our CSS style sheet. So we're going to use the WP in Q script, completely spelled that wrong, there we go, in Q script, and we're just going to call it init for initialize, and then we're going to get the template directory URI. So we're going to do get template directory URI, which will basically tell it that we want it to pull from the template directory. And then we're going to just, oh wait, no, this is for the JavaScript. We actually need to call get style sheet. Style sheet, I believe it's style sheet URI. Yeah, and that's a function, so let's close that out. And then let's go ahead and just copy this down. And I don't think we're going to be using a JavaScript because for the most part it's probably going to be handled. Actually, let's just leave that out for now because that script won't actually exist. If we do need to enqueue any scripts, we can enqueue them here the same way we did with our style sheet, and essentially it would just put it into the footer. So now we have our functions set up that pulls this, and then scripts and header. So we actually need to add the action for WordPress to use those functions. So we're going to do add action, and then the first one that's calling that setup is going to be called after setup theme, and we're just going to pull setup, and that should be that one. So essentially that's telling it that once the theme is initialized, it's going to pull this function here, which then pulls this function as well as registers our other custom abilities. And then we're going to do another add action, and inside of this we're going to do WP enqueue scripts, and then we're going to do scripts header, and that. Okay, so we could also do another one down here for the footer, and I'm gonna add it in here, and then I'm gonna comment it out so that you guys can see what it says and what you're supposed to do here. So we're gonna do, instead of enqueue scripts, we're gonna do WP footer, and then that's where we would call the scripts footer. So I'm gonna comment this out for now because we're not using it. And then inside of this, we would also do WP enqueue script. Oh, that just reminds me I messed up on this one. It's not enqueue script, it's enqueue style. This one's enqueue script because it's pulling a JavaScript. So we're going to do initialize again, and then we're going to, now we get the get template directory URI, and I believe we have to pass JavaScript to it. So this is getting the main folder of the template directory, and then you would pass on /js /initialize.js, and this would essentially grab the JavaScript file that would be inside of a JavaScript folder inside of our law firm folder. But again, we're not going to be using it. So I'm going to comment this out, but you would also need to pass an array for it to see what it needs to pull before it, which would be jQuery. Because most likely you're going to be using jQuery whenever you're writing it. But again, it's not something that we need right now, so I'm just going to comment it out. But this will give us the functionality that we need in order to kind of get started with setting up the fundamentals of our site. And now let's switch over to the index.php. This is going to be a very simple page. We're not going to do anything with it, but we do need to have the content displayed on it, or else Elementor will not work correctly. So let's go ahead and create that. So first thing we're going to do is get header, and then we're going to do if, and this is something you can just pull directly from WordPress's index.php or page.php. So basically we're just going to say if have post, which is a function, and then if it does, we're going to do while have post, and then we're just going to display the post. Not display the post, but we're going to grab the post. And then we're going to do the content, which is what Elementor is looking for. We're going to end while, and then end if. Essentially, that is all that you need. Let's go ahead and close out our PHP. So that's all that you need, and it's pretty much going to be the same thing on the page.php. So let's go ahead and take this, and we're going to just paste it in here. And then I think the only difference here is we're just going to grab the post. And that should, well, I forgot to do the footer. So let's do get footer as well. Let's go ahead and copy that over and paste it here. So that's essentially all of the setup that we currently need inside of the code. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to switch back to our Chrome window so that we can finish doing what we need to do on that side of it. Okay, so now we're back in Chrome, and I'm going to go to our appearance themes, and now we have this law firm sample. I'm going to go ahead and activate it, and it should activate with no issues. I say that, but I did something wrong in the code. Misspelling. Let's go back over here to functions and spell it correctly. So where is that at? Functions, line 3, register, ISTER. Okay, there we go. So let me just copy this. I did it 3 times because I copied it. So let's save that now and switch back over to Chrome, and now let's refresh. There we go. Alright, so now it's active. Another thing that you could add into this would be the thumbnail that displays it like this, but we'll get into that. I usually create those after the website's done just because I can take a screenshot of the finished product. Also, you don't need these 3. Having these 3 on here but not active just kind of creates like a loophole for hackers to be able to try to hack your website. So what I recommend doing, which I'm going to do in just a second, is going into the folder system and deleting those 3 themes. So I'm going to do that real quick off screen, and this, and delete. Because we don't need the other themes, this is just the one that we're going to be working with here. So let's refresh that, and now we just have our theme that's installed. Alright, so I'm going to end this one here. We have our custom theme built. The next steps is to start integrating Elementor, setting up some of the default settings, and I'll get into that next video. So stay tuned, and I appreciate you watching. I'll talk to you later.